She's here.
Oh, okay. That's fine. I need to speak with her.
What?
I need to speak with her.
Yeah, she's still
Hi, Corey. How are you? Nice to see you.
Would members of the Licensing and Standards Committee please report to Committee Room 1 for quorum? Members of the Licensing and Standards Committee, please report to Committee Room 1 for quorum. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Can I have a bit of quiet, please? Where's my thing? Where's the gavel? Good morning, everyone. We do have quorum. I will call this meeting to order. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 24th meeting of the Licensing Standards Committee. As chair of the committee, I would like to extend a warm welcome to members of the public and those watching the proceedings online or TV. As usual, I would like to remind everyone that you can find the agenda for today's meeting and follow the meeting in real time at www.toronto.ca/council. The Licensing Standards Committee gratefully acknowledges that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit Nations and the Haudenosaunee and the Huron-Wendat and homes of the many diverse Indigenous people. Conflicts of interest. Is there any conflict of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Members of the committee? If not, noted. Now, can I have a motion to confirm the minutes? Can I have a motion to confirm the minutes of the Licensing Standards Committee meeting of November the 16th, 2017, and the joint Licensing and Standards Committee meeting and the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee that took place on December the 4th, 2017? Speaker Nunziara is moving that motion. All those in favor? Against? Carried. Thank you. We do have a lengthy list of speakers for today's meeting, the green sheet. Okay. So before we get to it, I understand that Speaker Councilor Nunziara has a motion, but before I entertain that,
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you mentioned, in light of the number of speakers we have on the items, I have two motions that I would like to move. That speakers who have not pre-registered be allowed to register to speak until 10:30 a.m. on April 10, 2018, after which no further registration is allowed and the speakers list will be closed, and that the length of public presentations be limited to 3 minutes. And my second motion is that questions to staff from members of council, including committee members, take place after the public deputations be 3 minutes in total, and that questions of speakers by members of council, including committee members, be limited to 3 minutes, and that speaking times for all members of council, including committee members, be limited to 3 minutes.
thank
Those
you.
are my motion.
We have a motion from the Speaker. And yes, you can. Okay, so is there any questions to the mover? If not, we'll vote on it. Is Deputy Mayor, Councilor de Bermenke?
Could I see the first set of motions that were up? Thank you. May I speak to the item?
Please.
This is the appropriate time? Great.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'll certainly support motion number 1 because it allows members of the public to come and speak to us. I won't be supporting number 2 or the other motions that limit both the public and us as members of councils to 3 minutes. I think there are 18 speakers so far on the noise bylaw and 15 on the body rub parlors. I think when members of the public take time off of work or take time out of their family schedule to come here and give us deputations on what to them, and I'm sure what to us as well, are very serious matters. I don't think we should say at the last minute, we advertise that you can come and speak to us for 5 minutes, but now that you're here, we're going to chop your presentation time almost in half. So I haven't voted for limiting speakers in my first 14 years as being a city councillor, and I won't do it today. So I would urge members that, I know it's a longer list. I don't know if everyone's going to take 5 minutes to speak, but I think we're here to get in, to dig down into the details. These people cannot speak at council, so I would encourage my committee members to allow people to speak to the 5 minutes which we advertised. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Karigiannis.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm going to echo what my colleague said. It is important to hear, but one of the things that we can ask the presenters is that because of the time and everything else, if we can ask them not to be repetitive and try to keep their time short. I think they will be able to police themselves in order to do that, and I will not be supporting the 3 minutes.
That's fine. Anyone else? Councilor De Giorgio.
Mr. Chairman, I certainly agree with some of the sentiments expressed by my colleagues, but the reality is that a lot of the reports before us today focus on additional research having to be done. There are no real concrete recommendations before us, and I don't believe that the comments being made by the deputants will be with respect to any particular recommendations that are before us. And my gut feeling is that there will be a lot of duplication. So I'm supporting that the limit,
Please.
comments to 3 minutes, because no decisions are being made today. Essentially, a lot of the noise bylaw is being deferred to a future day when more specific comments come forward. So notwithstanding that you have a right to make comments, this is probably the second time we've dealt with this particular item, and we will deal with it a third time. And the third time is probably the more appropriate time to extend an opportunity for people to comment on what is before us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? If not, we'll vote on it. We have the first. Shall we vote individually? Okay, and recommendation number 1, all those in favor? It passes. And recommendation number 2, all those in favor? Against? Carries. There is another one. Do you want to split that one? As a package? Split. Recommendation number 1, all those in favor? Carries. Recommendation number 2, all those in favor? Against? Councilor Burnside, how do you? In favor? Okay, carries. Recommendation number 3, that speaking times for all members of council be limited to 3 minutes. All those in favor? Against? It carries. Thank you. So we do have a couple communications. One communication is from the Deputy Mayor, Glenn de Veramaker, that needs to be introduced. That will be a new business. And also there is another communication from Councillor Fletcher that for that communication for us to be able to introduce, procedurally speaking, we'll have to reopen that item. And that item was dealt with last fall, so it's not 1 year yet. I'll be more than glad to move the motion to reopen the item. For the clerk to be able to distribute the communication, we'll have to reopen.
Sorry, Mr.
And it
Chair.
has to do.
On a point of order, I thought I had sent a communication that would be distributed to committee members. Oh, okay.
No, yours is okay.
Oh, that.
We're talking with another communication from Councillor Fletcher.
Oh. I don't have that one. You're right.
So we are going to stand that communication down until. Okay, so we had this. This committee had a recommendation, had a communication from Councillor Janet Davis, dated September the 26th, 2017, that deals with dogs in schoolyards. Now, there is another communication from Councillor Fletcher that for us being able to deal with Councillor Fletcher's communication, we'll have to reopen this one because it relates to the same item. And I'll be more than glad to move the recommendation in terms to reopen the item first, and then it can be added to the agenda, and then we can deal with it.
Chair, we don't have copies.
I'm sorry?
We don't have copies of those.
Yeah, to do that, we'll have to reopen the items so the clerk can circulate, and then you can vote as you want after, but at least to have the communication.
Mr. Chair, can I ask on a point of order?
Point of order.
My understanding is, which I did, which was circulated to all members of the committee, so you actually know what I'm asking, is that when somebody asks that an item be either reopened or be added to the agenda, there's a communication sent to all of us so we actually know what we're voting for. You're asking me to vote with my eyes closed. I have absolutely zero idea what you're moving on behalf of Councillor Fletcher. I have zero idea. I mean, if you tell me it's about dogs and schoolyards, I'm going to believe you, but I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
So how can I vote?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I do understand the item quite well, and
Oh,
I'll be
I know you do.
more than glad to reopen that one, but I'm going to ask the clerk to provide further comments on this.
Back in
Members of the committee, please.
Back in September, the committee deferred indefinitely an item on dogs and schoolyards. A year has not passed since then. In the meantime, Councillor Fletcher has submitted a communication asking licensing and standards to consider the similar issue of dogs and schoolyards. Dogs and schoolyards. Councillor Fletcher has asked has submitted a communication on dogs in schoolyards. In order for the committee to consider that communication, it first must reopen its decision that it made in September to defer indefinitely the item of dogs in schoolyards, as you can see here. This is what the chair is saying, that he is prepared to move a procedural motion to reopen item LS 22.2 in order to permit that to be placed on the agenda, and for that item and Councillor Fletcher's communication to be attached to that item and to be considered again by the committee.
Mr. Chair, on a point of order, could I ask maybe yourself or with the help, the assistance of the clerk?
So we have point of order, and Deputy Mayor.
Could Councillor Fletcher send us individually that letter so we, again, that we know what we're actually going to vote on?
And to the city clerk, any comments?
That could be conceived as advancing business outside of a meeting, which is not permitted.
I'll speak to the item. If you're going to move a motion, I'll speak to the item.
There is no point of clarification, Councillor Carichanis, you know that. Point of order, what's your point of order?
Do we have jurisdiction in schoolyards?
Yes, we do. That's my understanding. We had discussions with city staff. I've been briefed on that. I had asked those questions, and I'm going to ask the legal department to comment on it, please.
Are you asking legal?
Yeah.
Okay.
Please. If we have jurisdiction over schoolyards in terms of enforcement of the bylaw.
So through the chair, I just want to respect the procedural aspect of this. This item is not before the committee yet, and I don't think it's appropriate for me to answer those questions.
Thank you.
I have another point of order, Mr. Chair.
I'm still dealing with the point of order of the Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, if you move to reopen an item, am I permitted to move deferral to the next meeting?
And
Of your motion.
That, yes, because with that, we'll be able to look at the merits of the communications from Councillor Fletcher, as well as to look at the merits of the communication that was before us from Councillor Davis, and that will be appropriate, and I'll be more than glad to do that.
Okay. If you move a motion, I will speak on it at the appropriate time.
So I'll be more than glad to move that motion that for this item to be dealt with at the committee. And we have Councillor Fletcher that it's here, and I'm going to ask her.
Thank you. That would be very appropriate. Certainly support that if you would reopen and move to the next meeting. And I know you want to hear about jurisdiction, et cetera. I just want to advise you that there are childcare centers in many schools over which there are regulations, and the city is the regulator for the childcare. So there's some gray areas, and that was in the letter that you haven't seen, and I'll respect the clerk and not circulate it to you. But I think we should at least look at the new information and have this conversation at Licensing and Standards, and very much appreciate that. And appreciate your reopening that, or moving
Thank you,
to
Councillor Fletcher.
Mr. Chair.
Anyone else who would like to speak on this item? Deputy Mayor DeBermaker, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I'm going to move deferral of your motion.
We'll have to reopen first, and then deferral will
okay.
come.
Then I'm not going to. Okay, then thank you. I thought I could move deferral, and the reason I would move deferral if I could. Yeah, once it's done, but no.
Sorry, once this motion has been adopted and the item has been placed on the agenda, then a motion to defer the item to the next meeting will be in order.
So, Mr. Chair, I will not vote in favor of this motion. If it could have been deferred first, so that I don't know if I'm voting in favor of something good or if I'm voting against something that's good. I don't know if I'm voting in favor of something that we've dealt with and shouldn't be before us, or if I'm voting against that. I have not a sentence before me. So, Mr. Chair, we've gone through the issue. It was very solid what this committee did. We've done some very good things. Councillor Davis's requests I felt were very inappropriate. We voted them down. So I really don't know what I'm dealing with. So if Councillor Fletcher would want to send individual letters so that we all know what we're actually talking about, then I'm happy to do that. But at this point, I can't support reopening an issue with my eyes closed, with zero information in front of me. So I will not support this.
Okay, is any other speakers on that? But even before we proceed with that, I think that it would be appropriate to have a good discussion with members of council who are interested in dealing with this item, and therefore I'll be withdrawing this motion to allow members of council to have that discussion, and then probably we can bring it forward to the next committee meeting. Are we okay with that? So I'm withdrawing that motion, and members of council, Councillor Fletcher, if you don't mind, maybe just to deal with that with members of council at large. Thank you. So, yeah, with the permission also of the committee on new items to be added to the agenda, I do have a motion that has to do with an item that was before the licensing standards a few months back, and it has to do with amendments to Chapter 740 street vending, so that those who want to sell all trades created at workstations are permitted to apply for a new permit. We deal with that last fall, and city staff were supposed to bring that report forward, but they haven't. So I'm going to move this motion, and I will ask the clerk to just to share with the members of the committee, and then we can deal a little bit later with that.
Okay, so it has to be a motion to add new business.
Yeah. So this is a motion to be added as a new business, and that will be a display, and I will stand it down for now, and we'll deal with it later. Okay? So now we have the motion from the Deputy Mayor, Glenn DeBramaker, that's changes to the fireworks regulations with 2 recommendations. And so we'll have to vote on this to introduce and to add this to the agenda. All those in favor? Against? So this is a new item on the agenda, and we'll deal with it after.
Well, Mr. Chair, I'm just wondering, because it's simply request for a staff report. I think my colleague, Councillor Karygiannis, has a slight amendment, so maybe we could just move it. And if I could speak to it very briefly, if we can do it now.
We have the amendment to it?
Yes.
I do have just to add two actual celebrations.
Okay, so we'll stand it down, and then we'll deal with it later.
Okay. I think it'll be a quick item. It's just a staff report.
We have Lara Deputy, so let's get on with that. So we have 6 items in today's agenda, and so the first item, LS 24.1, noise by law review update. We have speakers, so that item is going to be held. The next item, number 2, work plan review that deals with the body wrap parlors and holistics. We have a speaker, so the item is being held. The next item, LS 24.3, interim regulations for payday loan establishments. We have speakers, that's been held. Number 4, we have, that's alternative dispute resolutions. We have speakers, the item is held. And the last one, outdoor animal shelter standards, we have speakers as well. So all the items are being held.
Mr. Chairman, you missed number 5. So
On number 5
on number 5, I'll move the recommendation.
Okay, on number 5, we have a presentation that has to do with the graffiti management plan and the street art, and there is a presentation from city staff, and I would like that to...
Oh, so you're holding 5?
Yeah, I'm holding that one down for the presentation.
Hold on, we're still number 5. Yes.
let's deal with item number 5 to allow city staff just to move on with it, and so they don't have to be here all day as well. And that's item 5. With the permission of the committee, we can just move that one, and we can have the presentation first. Are we okay with that?
Yes,
All those in favor?
Mr. Chair, I think like Councillor Karygiannis, I would ask that we change the order of business after number 5 to deal with number 6 and then number 4, because I think those are relatively straightforward items with one speaker each, so that the poor gentleman, Mr. Zimmerman, at the end doesn't have to wait for all 55 speakers to speak before him. And Animal Services staff, and Councillor Layton, perhaps. Are you okay?
Oh, we're going to be graced by your presence.
Okay, we're going to be here all day, let me tell you. So I'll be okay with those recommendations as well.
Thank you.
So item 6 and item 4 to be moved on after the presentation. Okay, great.
And Mr. Chair, again, another point of order, I had a motion for this item, number 5. Just a simple request for staff report. I'm wondering if the clerks could just send, make a copy of it to circulate to committee members so they can read it in advance.
That would be great. And also, I'm going to ask the clerk, I have a question, a very specific question on this. The graffiti management plan and the street art and program has been so successful, and the City of Toronto, and I think that as a chair, I would like city staff to make a presentation at City Council. Is what would be the process in terms of having a presentation from city staff on an item that I'll be more than glad to hold the item at City Council for debate and perhaps to ask for a presentation. Can I have your comments on that?
That solely lies within Council's decision. Whether a committee makes a request or not, it's still within Council's decision whether to have a presentation or whether not.
Okay, so if that's the case, let's proceed with the presentation here. Good morning. Good to have you here.
That means he has to ask the speaker.
Please go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm Elise Parker. I'm the Director of the Public Realm Section and Transportation Services. On my right is my colleague, Randy McLean, who is the manager of the Beautiful Streets program. And 2 of my colleagues are sitting over here, Carolyn Taylor and Catherine Campbell, who you may have worked on street art projects. So I think there's a good question to ask about why we're at this committee discussing street art grants. And I think it's important to remember that in 2011, we had a significant graffiti vandalism problem in Toronto and no coordinated way to deal with it. And the Street Art Partnership Program that's in front of you today is one component of our total graffiti management plan that was developed at that time. We're quite proud that in 2015, the Graffiti Management Plan received a National Public-Private Sector Award for Excellence in Municipal Government from the Institute of Public Administration and Deloitte. The street art program is funded through the Public Realm Reserve Fund, which is constituted from the proceeds of the street furniture program, and these funds are intended for improving public streets. The graffiti management plan and the street art programs are rooted in Council's strategic actions. We attempt to ensure as many strategic actions as possible are advanced, including investing in culture, increasing employment opportunities, accelerating economic growth. This is moving forward. Seems to be on some...
Yeah, automatic. You're going to have to hold it. It's too late to change it.
All right. I'm sorry. We seem to be on an automatic timer here. Can I get some support here? It's on an automatic thing. Can we take it off?
Okay.
I'm sorry, Councillor, we're just trying to get it off. It's automatic. I can't talk as quickly as I'd like to. It's off the timer? Okay, thank you. So, ensuring as many of the strategic actions for council as possible is really intrinsic to this program. When council approved the graffiti management plan in 2012, it set out 4 key objectives, and those key objectives continue to govern the program to this day. The strict enforcement against graffiti vandalism, support for victims of graffiti vandalism, support for street art and street artists, and improved coordination for graffiti and street art installations. The street art suite of programs contribute to achieving 3 of the 4 objectives, with the exception of strict enforcement against graffiti vandalism, which is addressed by our colleagues in Municipal Licensing and Standards and the Toronto Police Services, although our office manages the citywide graffiti removal contract. All street art projects seek to create better streets through multiple objectives, including placemaking and civic pride, community engagement, inclusion, sense of belonging and public safety, mentorship and skill development, social and economic vitality, showcasing artists and their artwork, showcasing Toronto as a global center of creativity, and reducing graffiti vandalism. And the START program complements other city initiatives in economic development and culture and city planning to provide art in public locations. To contribute to achieving the multiple objectives of the graffiti management plan, we've developed a suite of programs and communication channels under the Street Art Toronto banner to respond to the local issues and circumstances. And I'll briefly walk through each of those 6 programs. The Partnership Grant Program, and that's what we're seeking approval for today. It's a public-private grant program for murals. START contributes up to 70% of the cost. Applicants are not-for-profit and charitable organizations, BIAs, and effective this year, individual artists and artist collectives are eligible to apply. Applicants are required to allocate 5% of their budget to maintain the project for 5 years. We encourage applications citywide and hold information centers in the districts to promote citywide work. Our underpass program was launched in 2014 with the aim of beautifying streetscapes and encouraging walkability and the feeling of safety along the city's 900 bridges and underpasses. We have a property owner support program, which is intended to support property owners who have been repeatedly targeted by graffiti vandalism. We have a community program where we work with community and neighborhood groups to remove graffiti vandalism from multiple properties, such as garage groups. We have 260 painted boxes and 118 wrapped boxes at some of Toronto's 2,600 signalized intersections, and there's a call out for more of these this year. We set up our artist directory as a way to promote Toronto's artists and also provide access for the public to artists. Partnerships are integral to our success. We work with a number of agencies, boards, and commissions, including the Toronto Police Service, Toronto Parking Authority, Toronto Transit Commission, Toronto Community Housing, our internal divisions, and many nonprofit community organizations and local schools. We're very proud that we've worked with Indigenous peoples on the creation and jurying of a number of projects across the city. We believe that effective community engagement and public consultation are cornerstones for successful START projects. We're fortunate to have received a lot of support and thoughtful press about the work, both locally and internationally. In previous years, we've supported street art murals using ceramic tiles at the Jack Layton Ferry Terminal, for example, and 3D surfaces along the Union Pearson Express Line in partnership with Metrolinx. More recently, Council approved a 2-year pilot program for the installation of road murals. The pilot has now been completed and will be reporting to Works Committee at its next meeting on May 8th. We've also initiated a fence art program. So this is where to reach us. And the success of all our street art programs comes from the outstanding partnerships we have with Toronto residents, business owners and operators, community groups, BIAs, Toronto Police Service, Toronto Parking Authority, TTC, as well as other city divisions, agencies, and corporations, and of course the incredibly talented artists, arts collectives, and arts organizations in the city. And in particular, we want to thank Councillor Palacio and acknowledge his leadership in supporting the graffiti management plan and supporting street art in Toronto, as well as our colleagues in municipal licensing and standards. Thank you.
Thank you so much. An amazing presentation, Ms. Parker, who is the Director of Public Realm, and also a huge thank you to Randy McLean, who is the manager of Beautiful Streets. Thank you for your amazing work. And any questions? If not, I think, yeah, we have questions, okay? Is Deputy Mayor Devermaker?
Thank you, and through Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Do you know roughly, since the program has started, how many art installations have been installed thanks to the funding?
Yes.
Just as a ballpark.
Yeah, in total, we have a suite of programs, so they're at different scales, but it's about in fact, it's 536 installations throughout the city, which go from large-scale underpass projects and partnership program to the traffic signal control boxes, but in total, over 500.
Over 500?
536, yes.
And where does the funding come from?
The funding comes from the Public Realm Reserve Fund, which is the proceeds from the Astral Media contract that we receive every year. And those funds are targeted for improvement of public space.
And could you tell me again, roughly, for those 500 projects, what the dollar value would be in terms of grants that have been provided by the city through that reserve fund? Ballpark again.
Ballpark on an average basis, it's about $500,000 a year, roughly, and we've done this for 6 years now, so in the order of $3 million. $3
million. And that street furniture contract, that's not actually money from taxpayers. That's the agreement where the company, if you will, provides the bus shelters and they put the advertisements on them, and we get, I don't know if it's a cut, but we get a certain revenue stream from them.
That's correct.
So then your program, or our program, has installed about $3 million worth of art on 500 different projects at no cost to the taxpayer.
That is correct.
Not bad. Thank you. Those are my questions, Mr. Chair. Oh, and I have another quick question. I've got a motion asking that, requesting a staff report to expand this program to city-owned projects. Do you think that's a good idea?
Councillor, we believe that it's worthwhile to investigate this. I know that it's been happening on some projects, for instance, in Toronto Water, but I think we believe it would be a good idea to look at it and see the ramifications for
citywide.
Citywide. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is, okay, we have Vice Chair Councilor Carichanis, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say thank you for coming. I want to say thank you publicly for the work that you've done in my area after we had those challenges, the two shootings. And I want to thank you also for putting my picture and the mayor up on the slide.
It's like a love fest.
And I will ignore the comments from my colleague, Deputy Mayor. When you're going to be moving to put what my colleague would say, when we do our projects and put street art on the boards, is there any way that you can take a look, and it's just a suggestion, you can answer it now or later on, that we have permanent boards that you shift from site to site, and they're permanently painted, versus doing projects? I mean, every time you do a project, you call a painter in, it's going to be costing a lot of money. Can we have, let's say, 30 or 40 pre-done boards that you can move from project to project, and they could be area specific, like Scarborough or North York, and display what is prominent in those communities? Would that be something that you can consider?
Absolutely. That's be one of the things we will certainly be looking at, so that the boards are reusable for many applications and have a longer shelf life.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
I just
The
have
Speaker
one.
Anunciara.
I just have one question, and thank you for the work that you do, and congratulations. But I just have one question on the number of projects that we have done, and with partnership with Metro Links and other business partners. Do we, once the artwork is installed, do we not do any inspections on them to ensure that the art is in place and that there hasn't been any damage to any of these projects?
No, we inspect them on a regular basis. We also have the public, the community calls in if they get, and it happens very seldom that any of the artwork is actually vandalized, is tagged, but we do inspect them annually at least, and as well as calls. I know there's an issue at the Weston GO station that was brought to our attention last year. It was in the fall, so we're in the process of getting that repaired. As soon as the weather turns, that the artist will be out there.
So you do regular inspections?
Yes, we do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, I have a quick one. As part of the street art, there was a request, and I'm not sure if that's going to, I think that during your presentation, Ms. Parker, you mentioned that there is going to be a report at the Public Works and Infrastructure on art on the streets. Do you mind just to elaborate a bit on that? I want to understand that part.
We ran a pilot project for 2 years in which we engaged communities to do street art murals. We're reporting out on that in May, and we're reporting, frankly, we're reporting positively with a, at least our recommendation to move forward on this on a permanent basis.
That is great, and we had a pilot. How successful has been the pilot in your opinion?
The pilots, we've had, I believe we've had 8 altogether, so 4 each year. So certainly the community groups that have come forward have been quite pleased with the results. We haven't had an extensive pressure to do a lot of street art murals, though, I would have to say.
Great. And in terms of funding, are we looking at aspect as well?
Yes, we're looking at supporting street art murals for communities.
That's great news. Great. I think, once again, thank you so much for your presentation. Now, any speakers on this item? If not, I would like to... Oh, you have a motion? Okay, I'm calling on speakers on this one. It's on this item. Councillor David Maker.
Sorry, yeah.
Okay, please go ahead.
If the clerk could put up the motion, My motion basically will ask for a staff report to come back to look at expanding this spectrum of projects to make sure we include public projects, because we're doing now hundreds of projects all over the city. I've had in my ward, and I have currently now as a pilot project, hoarding up on a park that's probably the size of 2 football fields. And originally it was just the hoarding going up. I know in my area there are lots of young people who love to spray, and they carry around spray cans with them. So we were able to get that public art put up around the public square at the Scarborough Civic Center at Albert Campbell Square, and it looks absolutely fantastic. To my knowledge, I was worried that somebody would end up getting some devil horns on their head, or a little mustache, or things that some taggers and young people do. But so far, so good, and you can tell when people walk through our public square, instead of just walking past a huge, gigantic construction site, which is a city parks project, they're actually walking past a giant 50-meter long mural with public art on it. And it's absolutely fantastic. And when you look at what's been done here, sorry, with over 500 projects done, at $3 million at no cost to the taxpayer, I think the existing program is fantastic. I think it does create a sense of life and vitality in every corner, every part of the city. I think expanding this to parks projects, water projects, transportation crews, if we're building a community center, if we're building a new library, that if you've got hoarding up, we should be following the rules that we've already established here and making sure they're beautiful. And Mr. Chair, I would like to tip my hat to you, because I was here back in 2012, and I know you were one of the instigators of this project to try to address the abundance of graffiti all across the city that was bringing down property values, that was sometimes making people feel unwelcome and places look a little shabby, to say the least, to replace, and I think our staff showed it very well, to take some of those walls that were tagged over and over and over again, and again looked like a place that maybe you shouldn't be, to change that with this great big black bear or panda bear or artwork of community folks. The artwork is absolutely fantastic, and I think now when people walk past those walls, they're like, wow, I live in a beautiful place. It may not be the richest part of town, but I live in a beautiful place. So I'm fully supportive of this project. I'm very happy that of the 14 projects being approved this year for almost $500,000, there is one in my ward. I hope over the years we'll see this diversity, and I think staff again have done a very good job of saying we're not just going, oh, 3 minutes. We're not just going to focus them in downtown Toronto. We're going to spread the wealth and share the wealth across the entire city. So it's got my full support, and I look forward to seeing what they do once these 14 projects are finished. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any questions to the mover? No, it's not that easy. And I do have a question, Deputy Mayor. And a disagree motion, but would you be willing to consider, because you're asking for a report, to include any contributions from sections 37, 45, or any other sections of the Planning Act? Because there are some parts of the city, as you noted, where we're kind of poor, where we don't have, so this would be fine. But there are other parts of the city where there is quite a bit of money, so there could be a contribution towards that from those sections as well, to include that as part of the report.
Yes, I think where it says funding options, if we wanted to do a friendly amendment saying including section 37 and 40,
45 or any other.
45, and I think that's a friendly amendment. Yep. Funding options including section 37 and 45. And as you know, Councillor, I think that is viable and worthwhile. In a ward like mine, or certainly in a number of wards in Scarborough, you could be a councillor for a decade or 2 decades and not see a single development application actually happen. I know for Councillor Crisanti in his ward, I don't think in his tenure here, and it's coming up to about 8 or 10 years, there are no development applications. So I think that's one possible option.
Great. So we do have, thank you, Deputy Mayor, so we have the friendly amendment.
Funding options.
Including section 37 and 45 of the Planning Act.
Bracket including section 37 and 45 funds.
Yep.
Yep. Yes.
So is that okay?
Yep.
Great. Now, speakers on this item, If not, I would like to speak on it.
Okay, can you remember to set the timer, please, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I do. I know that. Okay. First, I want to thank city staff for the tremendous amount of work that they have done and great work. I would like to move the recommendations within the report and also to adopt the presentation. In a short period of time, literally speaking, this street art program has captured the hearts and souls of Torontonians and around the world. And that's something that when you see the City of Toronto website, that's exactly why we look at it. And I am delighted and very proud of the street art program that has reached new heights. As one of the key components of the graffiti management plan that was adopted by City Council back in 2011, I believe it was, or 12, is also, as noted in the report, the street art program aims to develop, support, promote, and increase our awareness of the street art, which is an indispensable role in adding beauty and character to our local neighborhoods. And I think that's very important for all of us to understand that. And this program not only promotes creativity and cultural vibrancy, but also helps us to celebrate our cultural roots, our traditions, and we are doing that one piece at a time, one bridge at a time, one wall at a time, and now it seems like we're going to be doing one road at a time when this report comes to the Works and Infrastructure Committee meeting. So I'm very excited about that, and I really want to thank you for bringing the art close to our hearts. Thank you so much. Thank you. So my motion is to adopt the recommendations, and I'm going to ask for a recorded vote on this one with the item as amended. All those in favor? Councilor Nunziata, Di Giorgio, Palacio, Carichanes, De Vermaker. So it's unanimous. Thank you. Thanks so much. So it was the wish of the committee to change the order of business, and we are dealing now with item number 6. And that's the outdoor animal shelter standards and extreme weather. And we have one speaker, Michael Zimmerman. Good morning, good to have you here. You have 3 minutes, please go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I apologize in advance for the disturbing nature of the pictures you're about to see. I want to thank Councillor De Vermaker for defending the 5-minute limit. That's how I rehearsed this, and I want to thank Councillor Layton for his general support. My name is Mike Zimmerman. I retired after more than 25 years, recently retired after more than 25 years with the provincial government. The last half of my career there, I managed the Animal Welfare Department. I want to say today that while it can't hurt to change the bylaw to improve animal protection, I worry that it distracts from what I think is the much bigger issue. And that issue is that Toronto remains the biggest city in this country without local animal protection law enforcement. And changes to the city's bylaws and bylaw enforcement are not an adequate substitute. Ontario has the best provincial animal protection law in Canada, but it is not being enforced in Toronto. And here's the thing. The current provincial law already includes provisions that address in a number of ways the issue that today's proposed change to the bylaw seeks to address. And the provincial law sets out significant penalties, including jail time, fines of up to $60,000, and a lifetime ban on animal ownership. These penalties are much more severe than what could be imposed through a local bylaw. The provincial law also has important tools for those authorized to enforce it, and these include the ability to enter property without a warrant if an animal is in immediate distress, the ability to seize an animal, the ability to issue compliance orders to the owner of an animal, and again, none of these important tools would be available to municipal bylaw enforcement. So which would you rather have enforced in Toronto, the local bylaw or the provincial law? The OSPCA is the only entity that enforces the provincial law, but they have abandoned Toronto. And dealing with a poor freezing dog left in a Toronto backyard would, I think, be very low on their to-do list. They've certainly ignored much more serious incidents that have occurred here, hence the photos. Two of the most horrific cases of animal abuse I've ever encountered took place in Toronto in the last couple of years. There was a poodle named Frankie who had his muzzle constricted with tight elastic bands that cut through his skin. And even worse, there was a Labrador-type dog that was doused with acid who died an agonizing death. Based on my recent Freedom of Information request to the city, I found out that these animals ended up in the care of Toronto Animal Services, who properly notified the OSPCA, but the OSPCA never investigated these incidents. And 4 and 2 years later, respectively, there have been no charges, no justice, and that means these abusers are still out there. The solution, folks, is to get the province to authorize the city to enforce the provincial law. Toronto Animal Services could do a good job of it. And before anybody talks about downloading, it would also allow Toronto Animal Services to fundraise based on that new activity, and they'd be tapping into a proven $15 to $20 million funding market in this regard. There would also likely be greatly increased licensing reviews. Mr. Chair, this committee passed a resolution in late 2016 to move forward and ask the province for this authority. I propose that you please move forward on that important matter.
Thank you, Mr. Smith-Merwin. Any questions?
If I could just, and it'll be very, very brief, I just want this to be made crystal clear. These two cases of animal cruelty that happened in the city of Toronto went uninvestigated.
That's right.
So the people that did this poured acid on the face of a dog and tied a dog's mouth shut with elastic bands, were not investigated, no criminal charges were brought forward, nothing was done.
That is correct. The OSPCA has abandoned Toronto.
And the City of Toronto does not have the authority to enforce animal cruelty laws.
The City of Toronto doesn't have the authority to enforce the provincial animal protection law, which is the best in Canada.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? If not, questions to staff? Okay, is visiting members of council to speak? Yeah, we have questions to staff. Deputy Mayor, Deputy Maker, please go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to our animal services staff. In the cases like the ones that we see before us and other cases, are there ways that we could either through our own jurisdiction or by getting additional powers from the provincial government, are there ways that we could strengthen our animal protection bylaws and how we protect animals south of Steeles Avenue?
Through the chair, Toronto Animal Services does refer these cases to the OSPCA. Unfortunately, in both of these cases, they were stray animals. And so we did a number of measures to try to locate the abusers. We had no call. We did work with Toronto Police Services as well. OSPCA did not really work on either of these cases. They left it to Toronto Animal Services. We did not find any evidence, unfortunately. And we had to euthanize the lower dog, and the upper dog is very happy.
And I think did we, the city, find that dog on the top there a new home after we helped heal the wounds?
Absolutely. We spent donation dollars to bring him back to 100%, and he's now with his forever home.
Through Mr. Chair, if our department, our Animal Services Department, had the additional powers, I'm not going to say the same as, but similar to what the provincial government gives to the OSPCA, would that make your lives or your enforcement activity better and more effective?
I'm going to defer the question to legal on jurisdiction. However, if we aren't able to get the OSPCA, we do work with Toronto Police Services, who can lay criminal charges. Does that answer your question, Councillor?
I'm just wondering, again, I'll ask it slightly differently. Jurisdiction aside, if you had increased powers through the Provincial Act, similar to what the OSPCA Act allows them to do, would that make your enforcement activities more effective?
Through the chair, yes, it would.
Because?
Because we would have the ability to charge under the criminal code.
Yes, and do we now have the ability to, I'll call it take an animal? if you say if this was in my house, if one of these animals was in my house or in my backyard, would you have the ability today to go and secure that animal and take it away from me?
Through the chair, if it was in immediate distress, we would call Toronto Police Services and the OSPCA. Toronto Police Services usually arrives first, and they would remove the dog under their powers.
The police could today.
Through the chair, yes.
OSPCA could today.
Through the chair, yes.
But we cannot.
We
That
would,
was last question.
through the chair, we would obtain search warrants to prove that the dog was in immediate distress, and that would be the only way we could do that. Unfortunately, that process takes at least 2 to 3 days.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. So we have the communication from Councillor Layton, and with a very specific recommendation, and that's part of the report on number 6. And I would like to move the recommendation. Any other speakers? I'm sorry. Any other speakers on the item? Visiting members, Councillor Layton.
Thank you very much. And in the interest of time, I'll be very brief. This was first brought to my attention through Twitter of a couple of dogs that were being kept outside during extreme weather events this past winter that were it was reported by social media that they were in distress. And I quickly learned a little bit that about our animal the shelter section of our animal bylaw that actually says that we can keep pets outdoors during extreme weather events, and I found that just quite odd and potentially, or not potentially, but on that road towards animal cruelty, particularly in extreme weather events. There are some measures that we take around ensuring that those enclosures have insulation and proper bedding, but when it hits -30 or -20, -30 with the wind chill, I think that there's a more appropriate and significant intervention that needs to happen in the case with animals. Then, shortly after, I was approached by Mr. Zimmerman, who had actually come forward about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, talking about this issue of the OSPCA, and he highlighted it with these 2 specific cases, and which are horrific in nature, and that the city doesn't have an agency that has the responsibility and the authority to enforce our provincial animal cruelty laws is distressing and needs some action to be taken. It sounds like this committee has made that request before. I just thought that this was a good opportunity for us to make that request again during an election cycle. Perhaps the folks at Queen's Park will be listening, and someone will take this seriously. Thank you very much. Oh, there is an amendment to the motion that I believe my colleague, Councillor de Beermaker, will bring forward that clerks have.
Thank you, Councillor Layton. And any other speakers?
Can I just ask a question?
Is questions to the mover. Councillor Musiana.
Yeah, so on your recommendation, so I don't know what the penalties are, but are you looking at as well as increasing the penalties?
I didn't list anything outside of what is currently the within provincial animal cruelty laws. I don't know enough about them, to be quite honest, to start determining whether or not the penalties are sufficient. This is also why I didn't make a specific recommendation about bringing dogs or other animals inside during extreme weather events. I'm not a dog owner, and while I'm sympathetic to our canine friends, I really don't. I don't have enough of a background to understand when should dogs be brought in the wintertime, when is it safe for them to be outside. I think our staff will through consultation, be able to make that judgment.
We can discuss it at a later date. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Speakers, any other speakers? Deputy Mayor de Beermaker, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On behalf of Councillor Layton, I will move the motion that's up on the screen, asking our staff to report back on, I'll call it, ways and means to strengthen our ability to protect animals that are either out in extreme events or just in animal welfare laws in general. And as the photograph showed us, anyone who owns any type of pet would be horrified seeing that those photographs and to realize that there are some human beings out there who could be that evil to inflict that amount of pain on a defenseless animal. So I think our animal enforcement staff need the maximum amount of power that is allowed through the legislation. I don't think that they have that today. I think it could get better. That's no fault of ours. It's just it's in relation to provincial laws. And I think it's maybe time that we ask yet again that the provincial government not only strengthen their own laws, but allow the City of Toronto to make sure that when our animal enforcement officers go out, and that I have, for example, one day when I was at the shelter, a gentleman threw his dog off the 4th-story balcony. He was drunk, took his dog, threw it off a balcony. Our staff could not take that dog. Our staff, and that dog survived. And it was only through the intervention of the police and a very smart police officer, we were able to secure that animal and not have to require a dog that was just thrown off the 4th floor of a balcony to go back into that apartment with that same drunk person. So I think our officers need the ability to intervene when the health or welfare of an animal is at risk in these extreme situations. I am thrilled in my over decade now of being a city councillor. We have transformed our animal services. I would go so far as to say is every major animal welfare organization endorses our animal services, works in cooperation with us, supports us. There are always a few, sometimes an animal welfare group is an organization of one, so you get individuals who may or may not love animal services. But again, through my experience, all the people who are taking care of all types of animals now work in cooperation with our shelter. We do not put down any animal. We do not euthanize them unless, of course, for humane reasons. So when our shelters are filled with cats, we go and find people to adopt cats, and we work with the rescue groups to make sure that every single dog, every single cat that comes into our shelter finds a wonderful and supportive and loving forever home. So, Mr. Chair, I think this motion is a good one, and I hope our staff look at ways and means that they can once again tell us how to help them enforce animal protection laws. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other speakers? If not, we have a recommendation before us that's being amended. And all those in favor? Against? Carry. Adopted as amended. All those in favor? Against? Carry. Thank you. So we'll move to the next item, and that's alternative dispute resolution review. That's item, it was number 4, but now it's number 3. Okay, we have speakers. Kathy David.
Mr. Chair,
Good morning, good to have you here. Please go ahead, you have 3 minutes.
3 minutes?
3 minutes.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and thank you for the opportunity of speaking on this matter of alternative dispute resolution. In my opinion, a good number of neighbor disputes arise because of decisions made by the city. The city needs to look at their processes and practices that affect neighbors so that neighbor disputes don't arise in the first place. Once issues have been established and opinions entrenched, mediation is not effective. I think the solution to preventing neighbor disputes is to make sure decisions made by the city are reasonable, transparent, and equitable. A property owner with a growing family may want an addition on their house. If the addition exceeds the zoning laws, they go to the committee of adjustment. It's reasonable for the committee to approve an addition, but is it reasonable to make an unconditional approval when an addition includes a walkout from a 3rd story to a deck that is 18 by 16 feet in dimension? And the deck overlooks not only neighboring properties, but every rear yard on the street. If all adjacent and some other neighbors attend the committee meeting and are opposed and an unconditional approval, it's just setting the homeowner up for an OMB appeal. And when the walkout deck is disallowed by the OMB, then it's payback time. A neighbor dispute is born. It is reasonable for a property owner to have a 6-foot-high hedge around their yard. It's allowed by the city bylaws. But when the hedge is not maintained and grows to a height of 12 feet and a complaint is made, is it reasonable for the bylaw supervisor to say the city likes trees and do nothing about the hedge, especially when there is a solar heated pool in the adjacent yard that was installed long before the hedge was planted? Everyone is entitled to a reasonable enjoyment of property. Are some people immune to bylaws? That's what bylaws are for. Now, 10 years later, the hedge is 25 feet high, the pool has been filled in, and young children now living in the adjacent house can't play in their rear yard because raccoons living in the hedge are defecating in the yard. Does the city like trees that much? Bylaw officers require mediation skills to do their job. I believe those skills are written into their job description. The application for right of entry permit is a mediated process administered by municipal licensing and standards. The problem is that the process is not transparent. The owner of the property to be entered receives the applicant's submission and can make a response. However, the applicant cannot see the response. Essentially, it plays one neighbor against the other. The process needs to be transparent to keep everyone on the same page and on a level playing field. Also, there needs to be better process in administering the right of entry permit.
Please wrap up.
Sorry?
Try to wrap up. You are over 3 minutes.
Okay, well, the permit that I applied for took 15 months to process and was, in the end, after being told I would be getting it, was denied in December.
Thank you, Ms. Davis.
In some cases, I think neighbors also break bylaws intentionally to create this dispute situation so that then it paralyzes the city from doing anything about anything.
Thank you for your presentation. We have questions from the deputant, visiting members, and Vice Chair.
Thank you for coming. Really appreciate your input. Is there something that you still need to add for us to understand and comprehend your statements?
I just think that it's important for the city, as if they're looking for ways and means of improving service, that making sure bylaws are enforced and that reasonable decisions are made so that these disputes don't arise in the first place. I would like to see that during this trial period of mediation, information collected on what was the root cause of the dispute. And that would maybe give information on how the disputes could be avoided.
Any other questions? Are we done? Thank you. Any other questions? If not, thanks so much for your presentation. And so, yeah, and we don't have any additional speakers on this item. Questions to staff? Speakers on the item? If not, yeah, is Councilor Wantam?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and Mr. Chair. I just want to say thank you, staff, for this report. I think this is a very important initiative in terms of setting direction for the City of Toronto and its residents to find alternative dispute resolutions. Oftentimes at Community Council, we are asked to deliberate on appeals, whether it's fences or perhaps front yard parking, and it really comes out to who has access to the process of decision-making, who is able to sort of muster up the evidence before them, and who sometimes is the loudest and most vocal advocate. And it doesn't always give us the best outcomes, and I don't think it's also necessarily equitable with respect to those who are newcomers, who don't speak English, who don't understand the process. And I think that this model will be a model hopefully that we'll be using more of moving forward. I think it actually allows more people to access the process, and more importantly, with the changes in the OMB, and what will probably be more regimented hearings at the community council level. It actually allows us to focus on some of the bigger issues and having neighbors find an alternative way to settle those disputes without it being brought always to community council or any other appeal board. So I think that this is the strategic move, and it's also the smart move moving forward, because we're going to need people to find friendlier ways to resolve disputes as opposed to always bringing them to bodies such as this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Wantam. Fantastic. And Deputy Mayor DeBermaker, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam. Sorry, Madam Chair. Sorry, I thought you were the Speaker. That's Francis.
No, I haven't changed yet.
Mr. Chair.
Please go ahead.
I agree with what Councillor Wong-Tam says, and I'll certainly happy to move the recommendations. I think we've all been there when you have a community council of 10 councillors, probably 20 or 30 professional staff members in that room, while two individuals, two neighbors who have videotape of each other pulling out the other one's flowers, or dropping a chocolate bar wrapper on the other side of the property line, or doing all sorts of things. And that takes a vast amount of time and resources when you have two individuals fighting, sometimes because one painted the house orange and the other person doesn't like the color orange. So I think if we can have this dispute resolution path, that when we as councillors or when staff sort of realize these two people just don't like each other for whatever reason, maybe Glenn's daughter pushed Kristen's daughter off the swing one day, and now we've got 6 complaints about a property coming in. I think it would save us time, energy, effort, and money. Sometimes you will never resolve these issues, because again, I've done the dance many a time out in Scarborough with two neighbors who just, again, don't get along. And but I think this would be a very, very positive step for everyone involved, I think including our staff, to give them that ability to negotiate. I think very often now they may do it informally or gently, but really right now staff aren't supposed to do that. Staff are supposed to say, you're guilty or you're not guilty. There's a violation or there isn't a violation. And when I had the one resident who put in 100 complaints about other people who lived on her street, and our staff were obliged to put in 100 notices of violation to 70 different houses on the same street, all because one person got upset about something. They had no option but to annoy, harass, and aggravate a whole bunch of innocent people who had hedges on their property, for example, that had been there for 50 years and never bothered anybody, except there was a formal complaint and the hedge was 6 inches too high. So all of this stuff happens sometimes. So if we can actually reduce this, this will be good for everybody. So, Mr. Chair, I look forward to staff doing the pilot and hoping in a year to see what the results are. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Did you move the recommendations? Okay. So we have the recommendations before us. All those in favor? Against? Carry. Great. Thank you. We'll move on now to the next item, which is the noise bylaw review update.
Mr. Chair, on a point of order, I've just again looked at the deputation list, and I've lost it here. But I'm going to ask that we move, because I know there are councillors who have other business they have to attend, and they're hoping to deal with 24.3, the payday loan item. So I would move that we do that item next, before items number 1 and 2. And that way, again, the 3 deputants can do their business and leave. Thank you.
We rearranged already the order of businesses, and so we'll have to reopen and to move on to this one again. If that's a wish of the committee, I'll be more than glad to entertain that. One thing that I'm going to ask members of the committee is if we are going to need your presence here and all throughout, because we'll need quorum. So if any member is thinking about leaving for whatever reason, and it will be very helpful if you can please let us know. So we have a motion now to rearrange the order of business and to move to the next item that to be the interim regulations for payday loan establishments in consultation. So that's the motion before us. Are we okay with that? Okay, all those in favor? Against, carry, great. So the next item before us is LS 24.4, in this case, interim regulations for payday loan establishments and consultation. We have 3 speakers registered. The first speaker is Tony Irwin, followed by Patrick Mohan and Donna Borden. Tony Irwin. Tony Irwin.
Mr. Chair, I think as a quick item, could we release the item on the fireworks? Because Councillor Kirjani just did a friendly amendment to include other celebrations, cultural celebrations.
I'm okay with that.
No, the motion is not ready yet, so we'll
Ready? Okay.
stand it down. We are moving to the speakers on the interim regulations for payday loan establishments and consultation. The speakers, Tony Irwin, the first speaker, followed by Patrick Mohan. Donna Borden.
Maybe, Mr. Chairman, maybe because they realized we were doing number 1 first, they left?
And it's very possible because on the first item and second we have a very lengthy list of deputants. So we'll hold it down.
This item until
Please hold this
later.
item down. It's only fair because if we have those deputants that they left because of that, it won't be fair to them. So we'll move then to the first item, the noise bylaw review update. And we have 22 speakers. And I'm going to encourage once again members of the committee. We all knew that today we had a lengthy meeting, and I don't think that's going to be fair for any member just to leave because of other commitments. And so I'm going to ask members of the committee just please to reconsider any other business that you have at this point to make this meeting a priority. This has to be a priority, please. Otherwise, we're going to lose quorum. So let's get on with the speakers.
And Mr. Chair, I'm sorry for the delay, but I think staff have a very minor amendment that they're typing up now on the fireworks one, and that way that would allow our professional staff to leave. So if the staff could just put it on the screen, that was just adding a couple of words.
It's not ready yet.
I can't.
It's going to take a few seconds.
Is this after the first speaker? So we can free our deputy fire chief? Yes.
Mr. Chair, if it takes, would it take 60 seconds to put it on the screen and just type in those extra words?
Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to recess for 1 minute.
Sure, okay.
Until this motion is ready, is to allow the fire chief to leave as well. So we'll resume in one minute.
We'll bring a report back.
But in the rooms of any of the staff papers, let me just make that change on the
Okay, members of the public, we're resuming. Members of the committee, quorum. Okay, we're resuming the recess. And we have the motion with regards to the deputy mayor's recommendations. If we can have a display, please. And there was an amendment to that motion, and that's from the Vice Chair Karijanis.
I'm okay with that.
Are we okay with that? Okay. All those, any speakers, questions to staff, speakers?
Move to vote.
All those in favor? Against? Carried. Thank you so much. Great, done. Noise bylaw review update. We'll start with the speakers. Kesh Kumar, followed by Harold Smith. I'm going to name and 4 at a time. Kesh Kumar, Harold Smith, Caroline Johnson, and Gary Rigas.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, sir. Good to have you here. Please go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
I'm very grateful to have been given this opportunity to address this committee. My name is Kesh Kumar. Like you said, I'm a senior citizen. I'm a retiree. I live in Scarborough. For the past 3 years, I've had to suffer immensely at the hands of my neighbors who have been playing music very loudly on a regular basis on the weekends. I have had to leave my home on several occasions because I could not endure the noise. I would have to seek refuge in neighborhood parks or the libraries. The situation has become so stressful that I've had to seek counseling. My doctor has recommended counselors for me to consult with. I would like to point out that this is not I'm not alone in this. My neighbor, Robert Kerr, who died 3 years ago, was a diabetic, an amputee, who used to sit in his backyard on the weekends with a friend now and again to spend some time. It was his only pastime. And when the music started blasting, he'd have to get on his crutches and hobble into the house because he could not tolerate it. He was in his 70s at the time. God bless his soul. I have been in the situation, if I may point out further, that I go into the house and the music is so loud you can't even hear the TV that I'm playing. At times the sound that would intrude the speakers of my Walkman. And so it's a very, very difficult situation indeed. There's a gentleman, he is retired now. He used to do factory work, lifting and loading heavy bundles. He left home at 6 in the morning. Norbert Kelly would leave home at 6 in the morning, return at 6 in the evening. The weekends were the only time for him to relax a little bit. And then the music was so overwhelming, he couldn't even get his rest. Members of the committee, I urge you, when deliberating on these bylaws, I urge you to consider. I want you to consider a frail senior suffering from severe migraines, sitting in his house or in his backyard and being subjected to this type of bullying, as I call it.
New York, they do it.
I would like you to consider a terminally ill resident of any age staying at home with the help and support of relatives and medical staff being subjected to this type of harassment.
Please wrap up.
I'm sorry?
Try to wrap up, please. We're getting...
Just to summarize, there is another group. Consider also the senior, a mother trying to put her child to sleep, a night worker trying to get some sleep in the day, or any group of seniors, any group of individuals wanting some peace and quiet in their backyard. Kindly let these be your guidelines when deliberating on these bylaws. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. Thank you. Questions to the deputant? Is visiting members of council first? If not, Deputy Mayor, the Bear Maker, please go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Just so that I know sort of where you are in Scarborough, what main intersection do you live at?
I'm at Nielsen and Shepherd, my main intersection.
Okay, yeah, I know the area. It's sort of up Toronto Zoo-ish way.
Okay.
So when this happened to you, I won't talk about your other neighbors, but just to you. Did you talk to the local inspectors and the local city councillor about I'll call it the offending neighbor?
I have.
And the noise, I'll call it?
The outgoing councillor from my ward rendered no assistance. And when I had to go and read the bylaws myself. He and his assistant declared that there was nothing that could be done, that the noise could persist until 11 at night. I found the opposite when I did my research.
And did our inspectors tell you, for example, to keep a log of when these offenses occur?
Yes, yes, and I do have a log.
And did they tell you how long you had to keep a log for? Like was 2 days good enough, or would it have to be 20 days?
I can't recall, but they did say to keep a log, and I do have a log.
And then did they also tell you that if/when the city presses charges, you would have to go and testify?
Yes, they have.
Okay. And what would you like us to do? I mean, are you happy with the current process, or are there changes that you recommend?
It seems to me, I think we live in a civilized society today. And I think at this period of time when there are all types of technological devices that could be used for me to listen to my music without disturbing others, I think when we have those facilities, I think the law should be placed where there's absolutely no disturbance. No, your noise should not. That the noise that comes, your stereo, your music should not intrude on other people's space. If you want your enjoyment, do it. I listen to music all the time. I do not disturb anyone else.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, thank you for your presentation, sir.
Thank you very much.
Harold Smith, next. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I'm a member of the Toronto Noise Coalition. My name's Harold Smith. Gas leaf blowers are identified as harmful noise sources by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, U.S. EPA, as well as the National Landscape Industry Association. Toronto should treat this equipment's noise and emissions as a public health threat. This noise is currently legalized assault on everyone within earshot. It should be done to protect public health, as a number of Canadian and American cities do. Toronto should do the same. Lawn and garden equipment sound is higher than WHO outdoor daytime sound level standards of 55 dBA out to 800 feet from the source. This raises concerns regarding the impact on communities. And in these communities, the vulnerable populations susceptible to this noise include the workers themselves, children, the elderly, the retired, the sick, those working from home, and those working overnight shifts. Santa Monica's leaf blower enforcement update of May 2017, which I've submitted, is a model for Toronto. They succeed by public education about gas leaf blower noise damage and alternatives. They impose higher fines. They ticket offenders. They hire adequate staff. The National Association of Landscape Professionals Instruction Guide states, and I'm quoting, "Is our equipment noisier than 85 dB? Yes, most of it. Some of our equipment is 1,000 times higher, noisier," end of quotes. Electric leaf blowers should not be expensive. When regulations require all contractors use them, strong competition will normalize lawn maintenance costs. Environment Canada's stats indicate small engine emissions are significant, despite Energy and Environment's Transform Toronto conclusions to the contrary. That's in my submission also. The noise enforcement budget is unknown, but probably penalties per person. Skimping on enforcement inflates healthcare costs, but fails to collect potential fine revenue. Not a great business plan. Since TPS and OAGC are ceasing noise bylaw enforcement, MLS must provide even stronger, credible, timely, and fully funded enforcement. Require contractors mitigate construction noise on sites abutting residential properties, and standby generators on when Toronto Hydro is available. Abusive construction noise must not plague neighbors for months, if not years, so contractors can cut corners.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Any questions to the deputant? Yes, we do. Is Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for coming in today. Is it your submission to us, or is your recommendation to us that if we went from gas-powered, call it machines, to electric-powered machines, would that help?
It would certainly help. I mean, the noise from gas-powered equipment requires a lot of energy and noise to create the power. You're talking about exploding gases in piston chambers to operate the equipment.
Right, and through you, Mr. Chair, I know some municipalities, for example, ban leaf blowers.
Yes.
Do you know if there are electric leaf blowers out there?
Yes, there are.
Okay, and you think they could be used by any commercial company? They could still come to my house, and I don't use them, but they could come to my house and clean things up and push the grass and leaves around as they do?
There are alternatives to gas-powered equipment.
Yep.
They're battery-powered equipment. People can plug them in. My neighbor actually has one. He doesn't have a leaf blower, he has a lawnmower. He's quite happy with it, and I'm happy with it because I don't hear it.
So you think, for example, commercial operators could still do all their business, help all their customers, just not make as much noise?
That's right. I mean, it's done in cities in the United States.
Okay, great.
And Vancouver bans them. Westmount, Quebec, I've got an announcement by the mayor of Westmount that she is going to implement it.
Implement what, sorry?
A ban on gas-powered equipment, leaf blowers.
Okay, great, okay.
I don't have it in my submission, but I have it right here.
Okay. And would you extend that to things like snow blowers?
To me, snow blowers aren't that kind of a problem. It would be great if it could be done, but personally, I don't have that experience. Where I live, there are a lot of lawns, and there are teams of maintenance contractors coming through, and when I go in my backyard, I have to wear the same acoustic protection they do because I'm retired.
So you would, your advice to us is really more looking at leaf blowers and lawnmowers.
Yeah, it's the biggest noise equipment with the biggest noise footprint are leaf blowers, and they've got a tonality that extends quite a distance. I mean, it's a significant amount.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Burnside, please go ahead.
So with these leaf blowers, you say they're the biggest issue, but how many leaf blowers would there be compared to lawnmowers?
Well, I think there are more of the leaf blowers from what I've seen. I mean, I can't tell you, I'm not a landscape contractor, but I've seen 2 or 3 people. I mean, just this morning I saw 2 people blowing leaves down a driveway, kicking up all kinds of dust, and it's a big driveway. There's a tremendous amount of noise. And this is common where I live and through other areas throughout the city where there are a lot of lawns. And it's astounding to me that Energy and Environment chose not to consider small engine emissions as a source of pollution. It should have been in the Transform TO initiative.
Well, I think staff actually addressed that in the report, but.
I mean, I read that report and I commented on it in my submission.
So your contention is there are more leaf blowers than people with gas lawnmowers?
When a contractor.
That's a contractor, I understand that, but I'm talking about totality. So there are a lot of people that will have a gas lawnmower, may have an electric leaf blower. Like very few people have personal, I mean, I understand the commercial end of it.
Yes.
Very few people have a gas leaf blower as a personal, for their own home. They tend to have electric ones.
Yeah, I think so. Where I live, people don't have their own blower equipment, so I really can't speak to that.
Okay, and then, so how long has this been a problem?
Been a problem since people hired contractors to do this work. I remember when I moved into the house 40 years ago, almost 40 years ago, I hired somebody myself. And at that time, excuse me, I found it incredibly noisy, and I found out a service I could do without. And now I use a push mower to mow my lawn. So.
Okay, and last question. Respectfully, I know this is an issue for yourself and others. Do you see like a citywide, and I'm not trying to be flippant here, but uprising about leaf blowers? Like, I'm just not sure. It's an issue to some people, like aircraft noises, for instance, right? It's definitely an issue for some people, and I'm not minimizing that. But is it really is it an issue for the majority of citizens of Toronto? And at what point does council say, okay, well, there's a segment, and we have to address every segment?
Well, first of all, Vancouver has an appendix in their bylaw which has 6 or 7 maps called District F, and those are residential areas where this equipment is not permitted. The people who I was speaking to somebody this morning on their way to, on my way to the bus stop, and she said she never really considered it, but then she said, well, I go to work, so it's not a problem for her. I don't go to work. I mean, I've done my work. Now I'm in another phase.
Thank you.
But the other thing is, when I was going to work, I rode a bike, and I felt, with all the dust and stuff being blown my way, I found it quite uncomfortable. It's not like being in a car where you're protected. So it is a problem. I mean, there's literature by Dr. Sheila Basrer, numerous reports about the particulate matter, by the dust, by the pollen, by all the stuff that gets kicked up by this equipment. It's pretty bad.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Anyways, thank you for the opportunity
Vice Chair Karichanis, you have questions. Please go ahead.
Thank you, sir, for coming. Did I hear you correctly? You have a lawnmower, like a hand lawnmower?
I have a push mower.
A push mower. What happens, sir, if a person is disabled and they cannot use this push mower? What do we say to them then? Or you grow a little bit older and you cannot go out to do the push mower if you have a large lawn?
Well, I'm not saying that they can't use a power mower. I'm just saying that the equipment, it's from an acoustic standpoint, the best equipment to use is the quietest motorized equipment available, and gas-powered equipment is the loudest. I mean, I've just quoted from a National Landscape Association, and they said that this equipment is a public health threat.
Not have a power outlet outside their house, and they're disabled, and they need to bring a contractor in. How's that contractor supposed to cut the grass?
Well, I think, you know, the contractor can use, can purchase battery-operated equipment that is available. And I, you know, I've sourced it. I know that it exists. I just can't remember the exact name.
The contractor needs to do 10-hour work.
Yeah.
He will have to charge enough batteries and everything else to do that. This is what you're...
Well, I'm confident that they can get around that issue.
Okay.
And I think that people, entrepreneurs are innovative people.
Is this something that you're advocating for us to do in Toronto or throughout the GTA or throughout the country?
Well, I'd be happy to have it done in the GTA. I mean, in the city of Toronto. I think going to the GTA is, I think that's just too ambitious. I just don't think that's possible.
So if I can ask, then what do we say to a contractor that is stationed in Markham and he gets jobs in Toronto and he comes into Toronto and does these jobs?
Well, I would say that if you want to, look, Councillor, you have to determine what's more important. And to me, public health comes first. It's just like smoking, AIDS, opioids, noise. It's well documented by science and medicine. And I've read some of this literature, and you've read How Loud is Too Loud. Health comes number one over commerce. And it's up to entrepreneurs to figure out how to do this, how to get around it, how to provide services, a higher end of service, maybe provide a design service.
Thank you. Thank you.
But you know what I'm getting at.
Thank you.
I was in business for 43 years. I know how to innovate. Thank you.
Mr. Smith, I have one question. And Councilor Nunciara, please. I do have legitimate questions, and I have a question for the deputant. You were mentioning about with the modernization of the Toronto Police Services that non-emergency calls may be directed to municipal licensing standards. What's your take on that approach?
If I heard you correctly, it's about the downloading of noise complaints to municipal licensing standards. Well, municipal licensing, the budget for enforcement has been cut. It's been cut tremendously over the years, and I think that noise enforcement has lost credibility with the public, and this is a serious issue because you know, a loss of credibility erodes public's trust in municipal institutions. And I think it's very important to bolster public health with sufficient levels of trained staff devoted to dealing with noise. So
my question,
yes,
to be more specific, is in terms of jurisdiction, the Toronto Police Service was to enforce the noise control by law in relation to municipal licensing standards staff. Who do you think is more effective in terms of enforcement?
I don't know if I can answer that. I would just say that whoever's enforcing it has to have the power to enforce and have the tools to enforce and have adequate support to enforce, whether it be the police. I don't think the police are the best ones to do it because they're very, very expensive, and I think it should be less expensive staff.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your deputation. Thank you. Caroline Johnston?
Yes, sir. May I have the overhead on, please?
The other way. When you're ready, please let me know.
Oh, yes, sorry, I forgot. It's been a while.
Yeah, there we are. Okay, great. Okay, good morning. Good to have you here.
Morning.
You have 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
Please, can someone adjust it so that the whole picture shows? Right. Please, could someone adjust it so the whole picture shows?
Good morning. My name's Carolyn Johnson. I'm secretary of YQ&A, the neighbourhood group on the waterfront, where we get a great deal of noise from outdoor concerts all year round. My comments are to be found in your package as LS 24 1.8, so I will not bore you by repeating all of that. I'd like to address some of the other issues that have already been brought up this morning. With respect to lawn equipment, I used to have a home in Pickering with a large lawn. I had an electric lawnmower, and I now have a battery-powered electric lawnmower at my cottage, which has a half-acre lot. I don't mow the whole thing with that, of course. We have a ride-on tractor, which is quite quiet, but the battery-powered machine is useful for the small places, and it has 2 batteries, so when I ran out of juice, I go change the battery. It takes no time at all. To clean the lawn of leaves, when I lived in Pickering, I and my children used to rake. We also used to do that at the cottage until we got too old to do it. Human power is the quietest method, and it gives employment to people, especially young people who are constantly out of work in the summertime trying to make money for their university careers. So I think we should ban contractors who use noisy machines and rely on humans, please. Okay, the other issue I wish to raise is funding and enforcement. You see these signs? All these signs are plastered outside the Rogers Centre. You probably know where that is. The signs say no stopping, motor coach loading only, no idling. This bus does all of those things. It idles, it parks, it's not loading people, as you can see, the doors are shut. We get hundreds of these all the time. Even school buses do it. It's disgusting. We have all these fumes in the downtown area added to the traffic fumes that we have to put up with, and not to mention the noise of these motors running. Here's another one. This is Wellington Street West. I took this picture yesterday morning. One of the things it says, not very clear, I'm afraid, is no standing from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. Who should I find parked on the street but a visitor from Idaho in this motorhome? Its engine was running. It was probably there all night camping. This is part of the window blocking out that they had so that it was nice and dark inside and private, right? So I found out from calling a contact in Transportation Services to find out how I could get this bylaw enforced. I was referred to someone who did not answer the phone. I left a message. The message said, on her phone said, the best way to contact me is by email. So this was, like 9 o'clock yesterday morning. Overnight, she responded. This morning, that vehicle was not there. People do not respond in a timely fashion to complaints. Same thing happens with noisy concerts. If you complain to MLS about boom, boom, boom noise after hours, you will be lucky if anybody even calls you back a week later. They are not on the spot to do the work, and they need adequate funding, please.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you.
Questions to the Deputy Vice Chair Karijanis, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Really appreciate, ma'am, you coming in and giving us an update on your electric mowers and everything else. I got a question for you. If somebody is on a fixed income, a senior and disabled, they make $1,200, $1,300 a month, and they need to cut their grass, and the grass needs to be cut almost on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. If we have a company that comes in and uses manpower, they will take an hour. If they have 2 people, the charge will be something like 70 or 80 bucks. If a person comes in and does motorized, the cost is $25. What do we tell that senior? We ask them to pay more, or they're on a fixed income, in order for them to cut their grass and bring them into hardship? Or do we say, please go out and cut the grass on your own?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think this is a red herring question. The senior can shop around for the cheapest price. He doesn't have to take someone who brings noisy powered equipment. If he's elderly and impaired and in his home, he's probably having to be subjected to the terrible noise we've just heard will be produced by this equipment, which will make him unhappy and even sicker than he is already. Why doesn't he have a natural garden? Stop mowing the lawn altogether, just grow flowers.
So a senior that wants to cut their grass and it's on a fixed income and they pay something like $30 to a mowing company, if they look for somebody to do it by hand, that could go in $100.
I don't know the cost of these jobs.
Have you bothered, sorry, through the chair, have you looked at the costs? Have you investigated before you came to give us your deputation? I mean, you're coming advocating for a particular job, but what do we tell that senior that's on a fixed income?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to answer this question. It's ridiculous.
That's your choice to answer or not. Is Councillor one time?
Yes,
please go ahead.
By the way, I can tell you that the contractor that we do now use at our cottage, because we are too old to rake the leaves and our children are busy with their infants, they charge me $300 to do the job once in the year. They do use blowers. I wish they wouldn't, but they also use a lot of people that rake, and they are students. So.
Have you asked them what the cost would be if they don't use blowers?
No.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your deputation. You raise a very legitimate point regarding the lack of active enforcement. And as I see the images of those idling buses and the motor arcades that you've put on the screen, tells me that perhaps the proliferation of those vehicles is enough on the street that if a random officer did come by, they would probably do a fairly brisk business that day.
That's exactly what I told the MLS person I was in touch with. I said she could make a lot of money in fines if she would just walk up and down Wellington Street west of Spadina. Not a single car that I saw there that morning, yesterday morning, as I was walking along, had a ticket in it to show it had paid to pay there, to park there. And I would mention that I was walking on that particular street because Front Street is filthy because of the dust, and it's a very unpleasant place to be. That's because nobody's enforcing clean streets rules either.
Yeah. Can you verify for us how long does it take on average, because I see that you've got your eyes on the street, from the time that you make the call to 311 or to call active enforcement to the time that you see an officer out there?
I can't help you with that, Councillor, through you, Mr. Chair, because I have never personally called for enforcement until this particular incident. Many of my colleagues here will be able to speak to that. They have noise logs, they do all kinds of record keeping.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, thank you for your presentation. Next deputant is just one thing that I would like to share with members of the public is, as you know, the recommendations within this report, and most likely they're going to be referred back to city staff for additional research and consultation. And that's also in conjunction with the noise working group that was formed by City Council, so your concerns can be effectively addressed. So this item is going to be referred to city staff once again, and there will be a report coming back the third quarter of 2019 of next year. So I just wanted you to bear in mind that there is going to be additional work taking place. And having said that, let's move to the next deputant. And Gary Regis. Good morning. Good to have you here. Sorry to keep you waiting. Please go ahead.
Good morning.
You have 3 minutes.
And thank you for the opportunity to talk about the noise bylaw review, specifically as it relates to leaf blowers. My name is Gary Regis. I'm the Director of Government Relations for Retail Council of Canada. Retail Council of Canada is the voice of retail in Canada and represents more than 17,000 Ontario storefronts of all retail formats, including department, specialty, discount, independent stores, and general merchandise, grocery, and pharmacy. Our membership represents over 70% of core retail sales in Canada. The following are noise levels for some common sounds that I'd like to point out to the committee today. 10 decibels is normal breathing. 50 decibels is a refrigerator. 60 decibels, normal conversation. For your information, to put this into perspective, I'm violating a potential threshold of 45 decibels that staff are considering for leaf blowers. 70 decibels, vacuum cleaner. 70 decibels, hair dryer. 98 decibels, hand drill. 80 decibels dishwashers. A blender comes in at 85 decibels, a lawnmower at 75 decibels, 95 decibels for an electric drill, 105 decibels for a snow blower, 110 decibels for a power saw, and 120 decibels for chainsaws. At what level does one establish a noise threshold? And what other products will be potentially banned for sale? Let us not forget that all previous mentioned products and a host of others are CSA approved and allowed for sale in Canada. Consumers are a resourceful bunch and will just purchase the product in other 905 retail locations, or dare I say it, online. Let us remember that we are reacting to 23 complaints in 2016 and 28 complaints in 2017 in a population of almost 3 million citizens. In addition, if one were to establish a 45 decibel threshold for leaf blowers, it is not realistic since manufacturers claim through the consultation that was conducted that technology will not deliver a product to support that level of threshold. Retail Council of Canada and its members prefer the current approach to allow leaf blowers to be sold and used in the city, but only during specific times, such as 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. in residential zones. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Questions? Deputy visiting members of council first. If not, we'll come to the committee. Deputy Mayor De Vera Maker, please go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So at one level, if we want to reduce the noise from leaf blowers, and you say it's really not possible, so would the best alternative then be just to ban them? That's the simplest thing to do?
I think, Councillor, I worry about banning products that are legitimate products for sale in Canada. I think there is a use for products. I think that the time of use restriction is an appropriate manner in which to utilize those products, and I think that through proper consumer education and usage of it, we can get along well day to day. I'm not suggesting any kind of a ban on the product.
Would you agree with one of the deputants before you that electric leaf blowers are quieter than gas-powered leaf blowers?
I would let the city staff or the manufacturers support that question, but in general, as a layperson, I would say probably.
Right, so if we went to the CSA and they said to us, electric leaf blowers are quieter than non-electric, then that would be a good way for the City of Toronto to regulate leaf blowers so that we could have a little more peace on the weekends?
That's one option that one could consider, but one would also have to understand what would you do with all those individuals that currently have gas-powered devices? Would you prevent them from being used?
You just phase them out.
Okay.
Just like leaded gasoline, leaded paint. I don't think anyone comes into, I don't think any of your members sell leaded paint anymore in any of your stores, correct? We gave people an opportunity to phase things out. So you think if we're going to make changes, I guess your submission to us as on behalf of the retail sector is to involve you and to give you time to adapt, I'll call it?
For the marketplace, yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
And do you think phasing out lead paint was a good idea?
There were significant health issues that were being addressed, yes.
And do you think most retailers today actually continue to sell paint and continue to make money even with paint that doesn't have lead in it?
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Burnside.
So I think what I infer from my colleague's question is that leaf blowers, there's a problem with people's health. Should we ban power drills, snow blowers, lawn mowers, and all those other things that might cause that kind of noise?
Based on my submission, no.
Okay. You mentioned that there were 28 complaints regarding leaf blowers past year. Is that correct?
That's the information I received from city staff.
Okay, that's actually the information I received too. Let me ask you this. Did you hear one of the deputations where a concern was raised about the response time to enforcement of various bylaws, whether it's an idling bylaw, I think it was a deputant before you. Did you hear that concern that our MLS staff just aren't getting out there quickly enough to noise complaints in general?
I heard the comment.
Okay. Do you think that given the dearth of resources, that adding another layer of complexity, another law for 28 complaints would help that situation or hurt it?
I worry about the precedent that it would set for other potential products that might be then considered under the...
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, thank you, Mr. Reyes. I'm going to call the next 4 deputants. Eldon Mathers, Victoria Shepard, Joanne Braidman, and Dr. Sarah Bayer. Good morning. Good to have you here. Please go ahead.
Good morning.
3 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee for this opportunity to speak. I'm a resident of Ward 44. From 2013 through 2015, my household endured hundreds of hours of extremely loud, amplified music from a neighbor's vehicle, directed straight into the front of our house. As a result, I've become acquainted with the existing noise bylaw, its enforcement, and am well-placed to comment on nuisance noise. I make these comments on my own behalf. The concern that I bring to the committee is regarding the future and the potentially updated bylaw's general prohibition against noise. This is an essential component of the current noise bylaw. However, previous versions were written in a confusing manner, and this has resulted in the legacy of a widely held misconception that producing unlimited noise from 8 a.m. until 11 p.m. is a right conferred under the bylaw. This is particularly entrenched regarding amplified music. I've heard many people reiterate this false belief. If a prohibition against nuisance noise is not included or is not clearly stated as prohibited, the only protection available to residents would be to have Toronto Police Services enforce the applicable sections of the Criminal Code as per my example in the Attachment A that I've provided, courtesy of the Toronto Star. This Toronto Star article of September 11th, 2017 describes a resident allegedly disrupting a film set by directing extremely loud music at the set. Charges of mischief, interfere with property, public mischief, criminal harassment, and causing a disturbance were laid with a bail hearing the following day. This approach would obviously demand more Toronto Police Services time and be more costly for the city than simply having police or bylaw officers issue a ticket under a noise bylaw with a small fine for a first offense and escalating fines for repeat offenses. I ask that the committee ensure any proposed changes will clearly state that nuisance noise at any time impinging on private or public property will be prohibited under the new bylaw, that bylaw and Toronto police officers' subjective reports and witness accounts will be fit evidence for enforcement. Furthermore, I ask the committee to consider increasing staff levels of bylaw officers in order to provide effective enforcement. My experience has been that bylaw enforcement officers are unavailable at the times that they are most needed for noise enforcement. Holidays, weekends, weekend afternoons, and weeknights have a shortage of staff. Toronto Police Services are in great demand during those periods and are challenged to attend for lower priority concerns such as noise. A general prohibition would ensure the city's ability to fulfill its responsibility discouraging violation of the noise bylaw, as well as violating the criminal code. I would like to close by
Give it 30 seconds. Give it 2 seconds to wrap up, please.
I will close by stating the obvious, that a noise bylaw's fundamental consideration is to protect the health and quality of life for those within the city. Enforcement is a necessary investment to ensure compliance.
Sir. Any questions? Outside, Councillor? Okay. Deputy Mayor Glenn Beermaker.
Hi, great. Thank you. And through Mr. Chair, thank you for coming in today. Again, could I ask just roughly what main intersection you live at?
I live at Port Union and Lawrence.
Okay, yep, I know it very well. There is, I think, a general prohibition on excessive noise now.
There is.
So for your family, the problem was that our staff really just didn't do anything?
The current bylaw works. I'm concerned that the previous proposals put before this committee deleted the general prohibition. And then it goes on and is very confusing on when you're allowed to make a bunch of noise with your stereo, for example.
So is your concern that if we say, for example, from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. or 11 p.m., you can quote, make noise, that would make things worse as opposed to better?
It would make things worse, because the kind of guy that I'm dealing with is going to read that thing right down to the periods and the commas, trying to find the loophole so that he can harass the people around him.
Right.
This is a natural way to behave for these people.
Yep. So if that individual likes his loud music, he can, if he thinks he can blast it away and we let him, that's what he'll do, just because that's the way he is.
Absolutely.
And the current bylaw says that at least you can call one of our inspectors to say, the gentleman next door is again blaring his speakers and disturbing our peace and quiet.
Okay. I've called the police so many times that I lost count. They've attended 3 times and caught him in the act doing exactly this. My other neighbor phoned in the middle of the night at 1 a.m. and complained about this guy's noise out of his house, out of his residence. It's been an ongoing issue for a decade and a half. Now, the police attended 3 times, cut him cold, told him off, and drove away. Okay, that's their job. I understand that. They're busy. So I put in a request, I put in a complaint to bylaw enforcement after the third attendance, and they sent him a warning letter telling him to stop. Okay, so they stopped for a while. He started doing it again in 2017. I called the police again, and he attempted to order the police off his property. That didn't work. So then they told me, put in another complaint with bylaw enforcement. You know, this just goes on and on. Nobody hands the guy a ticket.
Right. So, and again, under the current regulations, you would have to log all that, and the city would have to take him to court, and you would have to come and testify.
That's correct, yes.
And would you like to testify against him, or would that cause you some discomfort?
I'd be perfectly happy to testify against the guy. I stood in front of the police, right in front of the guy.
Right.
I'm fine with it.
Just it would take you 6 months to a year for them to...
I'll do whatever I have to protect my family.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Before we go to the next Councillor, I do want to point something out, folks, that the Deputy General Manager has given me, and please try to remember what we're here for today. The request is City Council direct the Executive Director of Municipal Licensing and Standards to complete additional research and consultation for the review of Chapter 591, noise, and report back by the third quarter of 2019 with recommended changes to bylaw. I appreciate the fact, I think, Francis, you had some questions of the previous deputy? Oh. If she can come back, please. I would appreciate the fact, please, that if you keep to the subject at hand. I know some of you are here today to tell us of your, what happens with your neighbor and all that stuff, but we are asking staff to come back with recommendations. So if you have specific suggestions, would like to hear about what happens to your neighbor, but this is not what we're here for today. We're here for today to say to staff, you've overlooked this. Can you please look that? Let's give them to that direction. That's what I'm asking for, or else we're going to be here all day, folks. Francis, you're next. Thank you.
Yes, we will. Okay, just on your deputation, and I receive a lot of noise complaints as well, mostly in the summer because that's when people are partying. But my question to you is that, do you not agree that in order for charges to be laid by municipal licensing, is that they need to be there, and if the noise is 1 o'clock in the morning or whenever the noise happens, they need to be there and hear the noise in order to lay charges. Other than that, they ask you to document it. So it really is very difficult to lay charges to some of these, and noise complaints, and most of them are coming in the middle of the night, and we can't have inspectors running around in the middle of the night. So
you have policemen.
What would you?
Why not? Why not?
Okay.
Doctors work at night.
I would also...
Folks in the audience, please allow
I ask you to stop interrupting.
Francis,
so would you not agree that...
Speaker.
Yeah.
Folks in the audience, please allow the councillor to ask her questions and the speaker to answer. You have your chance to speak. Please withhold the questions or the applause and or comments. So
what would you recommend on that, knowing what we're the restrictions that we have, that it's very difficult.
Okay, I guess I have to apologize for not making it clear what my concern is. There is not enough staff. We need to hire more staff. So in answer to your preamble there,
So your recommendation to us today is hire more staff?
I'm asking you to hire enough staff to enforce the bylaw. The police are doing their jobs.
No, I understand. Okay, I just wanted to know. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Next speaker, we do have Victoria Shepherd. Please, thank you. You got 3 minutes.
Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Victoria Shepherd. I'm the Director of Operations at Music Canada Live, Canada's live music industry association. I'm here on behalf of our board, membership, and Executive Director Aaron Benjamin. Music Canada Live is dedicated to helping the live music industry develop its full potential through research, collaboration, and advocacy across Canada. Our mission is to entrench the economic, cultural, and social value and power of live music. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you this morning. In 2015, Music Canada Live helped release an economic profile of the live music industry in Ontario. It's called Live Music Measures Up. We established that this critically important sector contributes $1.2 billion to provincial GDP, creates 20,000 jobs, and that 83% of the companies interviewed were projecting future growth. Toronto is the single largest market for this sector. For the past 2 years, Music Canada Live has been part of the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport Provincial Roundtable called the Ontario Live Music Working Group. On April 16th, we will launch a document called The Vision for Ontario's Live Music Industry. This is an approach to position the sector for further growth across the province. The vision notes the importance of deeper industry and government collaboration, especially where regulatory issues are concerned, such as ensuring that noise bylaws are balanced, so that they address those who might be affected by live music presentation in their neighbourhoods without imposing undue restrictions on live music stakeholders. Live music plays a vital role across the city by transcending cultural differences, promoting public celebrations, fostering vibrant communities, and making Toronto desirable to live in or visit. Music Canada Live supports the August 2015 noise bylaw recommendations, prepared by the Toronto Music Industry Advisory Council, TMAC. I won't reiterate them given the time limitation, but I do urge you to review that document, and as you're considering your bylaw review, take into account the very valid points and evidence that this paper provides. Live music generates millions of dollars in revenue, employs thousands of people, drives tourism, and makes Toronto the thriving cultural centre where we love to live and work. We look forward to working with the City of Toronto to ensure that noise bylaws recognize the crucial contribution of live music stakeholders, small, medium, and large, both indoors and out, to the enrichment of our social, economic, and cultural well-being. Thank you for the opportunity this morning.
Thank you. Questions to the deputant? Yes, Councillor Wentam, please go ahead.
Thank you very much for your deputation. I just want to verify, with respect to the coalition that you represent, is it all live music or is it pre-recorded music as well?
We represent the live music sector, so we call ourselves the people behind live music. So our members are the people who make sure that artists get on stage to perform.
Okay, understood. And with respect to the venues, and I recognize that there's going to be some points of friction between the coalition that you represent and perhaps residents and neighborhood associations. I want to understand, do you believe that your coalition and Live Music Canada has taken every possible preactive consideration to try to insulate these venues, to make sure that there's good ongoing working relationships with the neighbors, that the management of the queuing of patrons trying to get into the establishments, as well as when the venues close and people are trying to get out of these establishments in a timely fashion. Do you believe that everything has been done possible to manage those neighborhood relations?
So in terms of your question, just to clarify for myself, you're asking not so much about the structure of the building and its ability to prevent noise seepage, say, but you're asking more about the patrons on the sidewalk.
Yeah, I'm asking about the ecosystem that's created in order for the music industry to thrive in very dense mixed-use neighborhoods, recognizing there's different times of operation. But I think what we're going to hear and what is listed before us is a number of deputies who probably raise some concerns that perhaps there needs to be more done proactively by the industry, the music industry, live music or recorded music, to try to manage those neighborhood relations.
Sure.
So do you believe in your opinion, has everything been done proactively to work with your membership to ensure that they have sort of work through the mechanical operations of their business to maintain good neighborhood relations?
Excellent question, thank you. And I want to draw your attention again to the Toronto Music Industry Advisory Council recommendations from August of 2016. And the very first page of the document, it actually starts with recommendations to benefit residents. And it talks about things like properties located in residential neighborhoods should have greater protection against intrusive noise. So what the document sets out is things that properties, developers, our industry, MLS can do to ensure that the relationship between the live music industry and the residents is respectful, so that groundwork is clearly laid, so that our members, the venues, for example, understand their obligations. There are many recommendations that will benefit businesses, but also provide clarity for both the businesses and for the residents, so that you have things like, okay, here's what the decibel limit is, and then the venues know what to do with it. For developers coming in and building new buildings, the agent of change principle, where there is an existing venue here that plays music, the people who are going to buy your properties need to be assured that they are going to be able to sleep in their homes and not be disturbed. And that puts the onus on the developers to think about how they're developing the buildings to provide noise insulation. So are we doing everything possible proactively? I don't think anyone ever is doing everything, but I think there are such solid recommendations in TMAC. I think it will really inform your work going forward, and I think it's very balanced between the live music industry as well as the residents.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor Sierra, please.
One fast question when you mentioned that. So would one of the obligations be for these venues is that if you're in a residential area where there are a lot of residents, that the businesses, they notify the residents that, you know, this venue is happening, and, you know, so they know in advance that, in fact, that you will be entertaining?
There is actually a specific recommendation in the TMAC document that pertains to special events like street festivals, like outdoor events, that recommends that everyone does a better job of making sure residents know that these kinds of things are happening
in advance.
So that, for example, if Big on Bloor is happening, residents know that for this weekend there's going to be additional noise.
Yeah.
So that is a strong recommendation that's already in the paper.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Lucy Troisi, you can.
Sorry, I was going to ask the same question that Councillor Nunziata just asked. There is a tremendous amount of events and festivals that go on our harbour front, the waterfront. So I just want to know what notice you provide and how much notice do you provide?
I don't know the answer to that question. It's not something that our industry association dictates. One of our core pillars, though, is education. So what we would love to do is, as your community works forward to develop the bylaws, is we want to make sure that we know exactly what they mean, so that we can say to our members, you know, best practices for notice would be, you know, 60 days or 30 days or 15 days, whatever the film industry office does, perhaps as an example. One of the recommendations in TMAC's submission is also to work very closely with the music office here in City Hall to help develop best practices for things like that. And as a national association, we would be very eager to work with you as you develop best practices, because the live music community doesn't want to be an outlier. It wants to work with the communities that it exists in, because they are the audience. They are the customers. So what they want to do is create a place where this ecosystem is You know, we support live music respects us. There are different property classifications that could be taken into account. You know, if you've got purely residential, you're going to want to have, and TMAC says this, you're going to want to have a lower decibel noise regulation than, say, a mixed use or a special use or a heritage use designation, where the nature of the construction of the building is such, based on historical construction premises, that you maybe can't insulate for noise the same way a developer could come in under the agent of change and build a building that is customized so that when I'm sleeping, I can't hear what's happening, say, downstairs in a club.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
John Breedman, followed by Dr. Sarah Byers. Please go ahead, 3 minutes.
My name is Joanne Brightman. I live near Casa Loma. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm also a member of the Toronto Noise Coalition and the Casa Loma Residents Association. For several years, we in the Casa Loma community have had the quiet enjoyment of our properties impaired by excessive noise from events put on by the Liberty Entertainment Group, which leases Casa Loma and Casa Loma stables from the city. Here are some following examples. Loud sound effects from the Legends of Horror Halloween event, which runs for over a month from late September through October 31st, from 5:30 p.m. with the last admission at 11 p.m. In addition to screaming sound effects, there are screaming customers and late night noise as crowds and taxis gather outside of the stables. We have met repeatedly with Councillor Mihevc and with Liberty with only minor improvements. Residents have filed many noise complaints and noise logs over the years, only to learn that these are invalid because Liberty has been granted long-term noise exemption permits, i.e. for 2 months from September 15th to November 15th. 2, during July and August, Liberty holds weekly, extremely high-volume amplified music events such as Soul in the City. In addition, all summer, the castle has weddings with amplified music on their outdoor patio. As a result, area residents are unable to sit on their outdoor patios due to this excessive noise. 3, the area behind Casa Loma Stables is being used by Liberty as a gravel parking lot and garbage disposal and storage site. There's constant late-night car traffic on gravel and daytime high-volume screeching and beeping noise as trucks deposit and load up large industrial bins of refuse, impairing the quiet enjoyment of property for residents. So I'd like to stress that Casa Loma and the stables are embedded in a family-oriented residential area with many young families with children. We urge you, the committee, to follow New York City's example and adopt very low tolerance levels for establishments which create noise in a residential area as follows. 1, prohibit amplified noise in a residential area. 2, adopt a policy of timely and strict enforcement of noise bylaws with meaningful penalties for violators. 3, prohibit the granting of these long-duration, multi-week and month noise exemption permits. These exemptions should be exceptions, not the norm, and they should be used for special occasions only. 4, curtail the permitted duration of noise-creating activities. For example, the Casa Loma Halloween event should not run for over a month, maybe 10 days, and last admission should be earlier. 5, require the use of the latest technologies such as muted truck beeping and sound barriers where a residential property abuts a noise-creating entity to mitigate the noise at source. And 6, require all noise-creating establishments embedded in a residential community to have a robust noise mitigation plan drawn up in...
Thank you, Ms. Braidman. Would you be kind enough to share your submission with the members of council? Because we'd like to read
I have
them.
sent all the members of this committee a similar document. This is shortened.
Okay, great.
I just wanted to add one thing, that we all want Casa Loma to be vibrant, to be successful, but not at the expense of the neighborhood's quiet enjoyment of the...
We get it. Thank you. You have questions. Vice Chair Karijanis, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the Deputy, thank you very much for coming. I appreciate the fact that noise, people shouldn't have to put up with noise anywhere. However, the venue of Casa Loma with Liberty, when the city allowed them to use Casa Loma and to keep it up and do all that work, their lease with us, if I'm not mistaken, allowed them to put weddings, to do gatherings. So are we supposed to go back to them and say, sorry, we want it back and you can't do what we're allowing you to do?
I have
what you're asking
obtained
the
a
city to
copy of the lease agreement that the city has with Liberty, and actually they are in violation of many of the terms of that lease agreement. The main one of which is they are not to create a nuisance in the neighborhood, and noise is a nuisance.
But they're allowed to have parties, they're allowed to have weddings?
They can, but maybe not have amplified music on their outdoor patio.
But I'm sure that if a wedding is
During a
happening...
wedding.
If a wedding is happening and there's a joy within the family, you do not want to take that joy away from the family, allowing them
No,
to have their wedding?
They can, if they want to have loud dance music, go inside. If you want to have a nice quartet with your wedding out on the patio, that's fine. That's not disturbing anyone.
So somebody that has a wedding and they want to celebrate and it's good weather and they want to dance outside, they shouldn't do that, right?
Not if it's violating the terms of the lease agreement and disturbing the neighborhood.
And I was thinking to book my next daughter's wedding at Casa Loma.
It's a beautiful venue, but just keep the noise inside.
It is a beautiful venue, but through the chair, there's going to be noise that's going to be created.
This is every weekend, like starting in May through October.
Right.
Every single weekend, there are multiple weddings at this venue.
And Casa Loma was built before your house, correct?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Is Councilor Burnside, please go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, it's sort of on the tail of Councilor Karygiannis. You want to prohibit amplified noise. I get that. But my question really is, how long have weddings been going on at Casa Loma?
Pardon?
How long have weddings been going on at Casa Loma?
I'm not sure. I mean, I know the complaint started in 2015.
Well, I know the complaints, but would it be safe to say that weddings have been, people have been having weddings at Casa Loma for 30 years?
I agree that's probably true, but certainly the venue has changed significantly in the last number of years since Liberty has taken it over.
Absolutely. Would it be safe to say that there are different styles of weddings there now? Because you're talking about a quartet or
I guess there are.
As opposed, right. And I guess the issue I have is that it's kind of like, in many ways, being beside an airport. Like it's a renowned venue space. It has had weddings for a number of years. Obviously, they have to morph in. Businesses morph into various iterations, and absolutely they need to respect the law, the rules as the city has laid down. But to prohibit amplified noise as an absolute, don't you think that would be somewhat onerous and not warranted, given that, to Councillor Karygiannis's point, weddings have been, well, Casa Loma's been around for over 100 years, we know that, and weddings have been performed there for probably as long.
Yeah. I mean, actually, the Casa Loma people are, I believe, working to reduce the amplified noise that they have there. I do think the bigger issue, which no one is asking me about, is the Legends of Horror Halloween event, for which the municipal licensing provides long-term noise exemption permits for 2 months. Perhaps you can explain to me and the audience how that is permitted. How is that allowed?
Well, I'm only asking questions as in terms of what you've brought up, and I chose to ask about weddings, but I will ask about that. What time does it go until these the Halloween events?
The last admission is 11 p.m., so that means customers are leaving there around midnight and congregating at the exit, which is at Casa Loma Stables, because they go through the tunnel and emerge outside of the stables, and then they congregate there and call Uber and taxis. And so it is extremely noisy. I've had small children. We actually petitioned the mayor to do something about this. Within about 8 hours, I got over 100 people to sign this petition. And speaking to people, one little boy asked me, could he please talk to the mayor and ask the mayor to stop the screaming because he can't sleep and it's scary.
So, okay, sorry, just I wanted to, in terms of the amplified noise from the event, what time does that stop, though? Do you know?
It goes until the last person leaves. Like that's what they've paid $60 or more to go and see.
So you're saying midnight?
Walk through the grounds.
So you're saying midnight, an hour after? Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Just for your information, Ms. Braidman, we did receive, members of the committee, including the mayor, we did receive your communication, and that's noted as LS 24.1.10, so with your 8 recommendations as well. Thank you. And thank you for your presentation. Dr. Sarah Bayer?
There are 3 of us from the
Oh, you are together with Helen Clark. Okay.
Yorkville, Greater Yorkville.
Fantastic. Good to have you here.
And Mr. Baker had to leave. So 3 minutes are being lost.
So you have altogether 3 minutes each.
And
at your pleasure, you
when.
have together 6 minutes to speak.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So please go ahead.
I am Dr. Sarah Bayer of 145 Cumberland Street and represent the Greater Yorkville Anti-Noise Coalition. We represent approximately 9,000 residents. As soon as the weather allows, the restaurants begin opening their patios, the music penetrating into our condos.
Members of council, please, the council side. Gary Janice, please. Sorry, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Music penetrating into our condos from the patios makes it impossible to sleep, particularly Thursdays through Sundays. There are many of us whose functioning after a sleepless night is greatly compromised. I shared with the committee at one of the meetings about my very sick husband and my inability to make urgently needed medical and other decisions on his behalf following a sleepless night, resulting from music emanating from nearby restaurants and bars who have patios. Similarly, there are examples of business people considering moving out of Toronto, in one instance with her 120 employees, if the music from nearby patios makes for sleepless nights and her inability to function maximally that day after. We can provide specifics if needed. We will not succeed in making Toronto the vibrant, dynamic city we want if hotels have to reimburse their guests because they couldn't sleep. Again, we can provide examples. We strongly urge that the bylaws protect Toronto residents and businesses by providing clear language about the night noise prohibitions between the hours of 11 p.m. and 9 a.m. on weekends and 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. on weekdays. We urge that during these hours, patios be prohibited from using amplified sound, and that during those hours, all sound be contained within the walls, just as Chicago has, so that any music heard outside of the walls of the establishment constitute a violation. The current language that the sound not be audible beyond the property line of the establishment is inadequate, since sound, while not heard at the street level, can be heard. It makes for a sound tunnel traveling upward and heard loudly in our condos. In Chicago, as I said, the outdoor patios Noise is prohibited after 10 p.m. They say they get very stiff fines if they don't obey. Guests are told to go indoors. We suggest a penalty. By the way, New York City has similar bylaws. I sleep there like a baby. I go there very often. We suggest penalties for a first offense that significantly exceed the current meaningless amount. The second offense should threaten license suspension or revocation, and that these penalties be charged against the owners and not the corporations. At the current level of the very low penalties, it is not worth, I have it in quotes, for these establishments to obey the law. We are addressing the issues of enforcement and penalty to this body, requesting that this bylaw committee consider including penalty levels within the bylaws proper. This could potentially serve as a deterrent to would-be offenders and possibly serve as an aid to the already strained enforcement agencies.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Clark?
My name is Helen Clark. I'm a resident of 145 Cumberland Street and a member of the Yorkville Residents Anti-Noise Coalition and, of course, the Greater Yorkville Residents Association and the Toronto Noise Coalition. I urge the city to have the vision and the courage to recognize the very human issues of stress and health related to sleep deprivation. During the warmer months when restaurants and bars open their patios, amplified music beyond the hours of 11 p.m., often lasting beyond 2 a.m., makes it impossible to fall or stay asleep. This is further aggravated by the frequent revved-up motorcycles and car engines. We have become residents seeking constant mitigation with the offending establishments, awaiting court action in one instance for 3.5 years without having had a hearing to date. The current bylaws must reflect more timely and more meaningful penalties. They are currently woefully ineffective. Establishments need to connect the punishment to the offense, and with so much time lapsing between the offense and punitive measures being so minimal, it hinders that possibility. No amplified music should be allowed after 11 p.m. on outdoor patios. We have a right to a peaceful night's sleep.
Right on time. Thank you so much. Amazing. Great. Any questions to the deputants? If not, Vice Chair Karygiannis.
Thank you. I really appreciate you coming here today. But let me understand, you want patios to stop the music, to stop serving or people laughing
Oh, no,
after?
not
They
at
can
all.
serve, but no music.
They can go inside like New York or Chicago
Okay,
or,
so after 10 o'clock in a nice...
no,
I'm saying 11 o'clock.
11 o'clock.
In Chicago,
ladies?
it's 10 o'clock.
Allow me to finish, please. So what you're asking for is that we tell patrons at the patios, and there's a lot of patios in the city of Toronto, that they should go, as in Chicago, 10 o'clock, you're asking for 11 o'clock in Toronto, and they should stop, you know, like pick up their food and transfer it inside. Is this what
No.
suggesting?
No. We're just saying that the amplified music and the power of technology today has become really abusive. And we're asking, maybe we need a little bit of education. I would say to my family, and I would say to my daughter and her family, that, hey, we all need to be a little bit more considerate. And why not just have your fun on your patios, have your parties. But when this loud, amplified music, why do we need that outdoors after 11 p.m.?
Well, Chair, one further question. You know, throughout Europe, there's outside patios. People usually start going out after 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock.
Right.
And there's music and there's vibrancy and there's everything. And in Toronto, being a multicultural city, we're trying to catch up with what Europe is doing.
Germany in particular, perhaps?
Sorry?
In Germany, there's there has to be an
Madam,
attitude of consideration.
Let me finish, please.
Yeah.
I can name you the countries where outside patios happen. In my country of birth, there's outside music. People start at 10 o'clock and they go until 5 to 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Are we trying to move in the fashion of reaching into multiculturalism, diversity, and accepting people and their cultures, or are we going to go back 60 years and say we don't want that?
I'm from an immigrant family.
So am I.
And, yeah, and I would say in warm countries, they have all year to go outside. We only have a very short period. We're a winter Eastern North American country, and we've always had the rule of law here.
So our citizens should not enjoy what is happening.
Secretary Janice,
Thank you.
they have answered.
Okay.
I would like to respond.
I would say
to the
Please, there is another question in Councilor Burnside. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So you did talk about touch on the weather. So how many months is this an issue of the year?
May. Well, it starts spring, summer, and fall.
So 6, 7 months?
At least.
My impression of Yorkville is that it's a kind of an entertainment zone. Is that fair to say?
It's a mixed commercial residential area. It has, we have a condominium there, and in our building there are there are all sorts of ages, including seniors. And
when was the condominium built?
That is one of the most the building which we are living in has very, very strong, it's built better than any of the standards that are built today. It was the first one built in Yorkville. And my feeling is that when you tell people, oh, well, get better windows, we have very good windows. But if you tell people to get better windows, that gives the onus on other people to expand their noise capability, because it never stops.
I wasn't going to suggest that. Do your windows open?
Oh, obviously not. We can open our windows.
Okay. And sorry, when was your condominium built?
It was built about 30 years ago. It was one of the model buildings. Yeah, 85?
85?
Yeah.
Yeah,
we have 9-foot concrete walls between our units. We have really strong windows.
So one of the I believe one of the challenges that council wrestles with is the amount of, or the sheer number of residential developments butted against, whether it's an entertainment district or an employment zone, right? And it's, you know, quite often it's not a good mix. I just remember probably about 30 years ago going down to Yorkville, and I can't even remember, Remy's maybe, was that one of the places? And they had music going till 1 in the morning.
But they were no problem.
Okay, so what would you say to people that said, hey, this has been going on a long time? Chances are people have moved into the area knowing what you're kind of up against. What would you say to that comment?
I would say that the amount of population moving into Yorkville is unbelievable. We love it. But when these huge, we're slated to be 9 million people in the Greater Toronto Area by 2040, if I'm correct. I'm saying that we have to think about these issues, because in Yorkville, we have people that as no comparison of the people coming into Yorkville now, if you compare it to 10 years ago. It's increased.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so
Move
much.
to recess.
Just before we recess, we have a couple more minutes. To the members of the public, we have, just if I can have your attention just for 1 second, we still have another 11 deputants for this item, and for the next one, on the body wrap parlors, we have 16 more. Now, the recommendations from city staff, as it relates to the item before us, is to do further consultation. So even though we do appreciate all your comments, most likely we'll be meeting once again when the reports and the recommendations after those consultations take place. So I'm just letting you know that if we can just focus a little bit more on what's on the report. We understand how passionate you are in terms of the concerns that matter so much to you. We're going to recess.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to, and then when we come back from lunch, we'll go to the payday loans.
We're going to recess until 1:30, so we'll reconvene at 1:30. We'll recess for 1 hour.
Where's your quorum gone? You can't decide.
No, we do have quorum. Thank you.